Today we have several prospect signings to discuss. We have a player on unconditional waivers for the purpose of contract termination, and we also want to take a look at some potential trade rumors involving Jack Eichel maybe being involved with a deal to the Arizona Coyotes, and could Sam Reinhart end up out west, but not in Western Canada, but maybe in California. We'll discuss the latest coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have a variety of things to look at here today. I want to kick things off with the news that we had a player go through unconditional waivers for the purpose of contract termination, and that's Pavel Shen of the Boston Bruins, a 2018 draft selection. Has spent parts of the past 2 years playing for them in the American Hockey League, and he's been put through waivers, so the contract could be terminated. He still had 1 year left on his entry-level deal, but it looks as though he's going to be returning back, likely to play in Russia. One of our viewers actually left a comment insinuating there was other issues going on with Shen off the ice. I've done some research, and I haven't been able to find anything to actually substantiate those claims, but at this point, he's definitely terminating the contract. Now we know 100% regardless of the reasons. Things really weren't working out professionally on the ice anyhow, and his time with the Bruins organization has come to a close here. Now, we have several other signings here, most of which are prospect signings, so let's dive into these here one at a time. The Carolina Hurricanes have signed prospect Tuukka Teskala, who was a 2019 fourth-round selection from Finland. Teskala is a right-wing prospect, so not quite clear when he'll be making the jump to North America. He very well could continue to play over in Europe and have this contract slide another year, but we'll have time to wait and find out. He'll likely be invited to training camp, and then they'll decide from there where his future is best for him to play and develop for the upcoming season. The Chicago Blackhawks have signed Arvid Soderblom, who's a very interesting-looking Swedish goaltending prospect, 21 years old. They said he hasn't been drafted, but he's been playing very well over in Sweden in the SHL. He's got some really good stats from this past season, where he played in 22 games and had a .922 save percentage and goals against just over 2. So some solid numbers there for Soderblom. So the Chicago Blackhawks are a team that could certainly use some more depth at the goaltending position. Obviously, we saw a guy like Lankinen really emerge this year as somebody who's obviously can be a player for them in that position now. That's something that they probably weren't banking on going into the year, and obviously we'll see how things go with Soderblom. Doesn't mean he'll be at the NHL level right away by any means. He could certainly take some more time to develop through their minor league system possibly, but still it could be a good find based on the stats he's putting up and the fact that he's already been playing professional level hockey for the past little while. The San Jose Sharks have signed 2020 third round selection Daniil Gushkin, who's a left winger out of Russia. He actually spent this past year playing in the USHL, where he put up 64 points in 46 games. He was scheduled to play in the Ontario Hockey League. Actually, his rights were owned by Niagara in the OHL for Canadian junior hockey, but of course they never got their season off the grounds here. They ended up basically being shuttered a whole year, so he ended up staying in the USHL, but certainly an interesting prospect. He's a little bit smaller, certainly somebody who appears to be very creative offensively, very skilled, but certainly needs to get a little bit stronger. It looks like he has the skill at least. If he can get a little bit more muscle and size, he should stand a better chance to push for a job there in the next few years. The New Jersey Devils have signed a goaltending prospect, Akira Schmid, who was a 2018 draft selection. He was taken in the 5th round. He's 6'4", only listed on 165 pounds. So, he's really tall and lanky. So he certainly probably needs to bulk up there a little bit, but a lot of times with goalies, you need them to be flexible as well. He also played this past year in the USHL, playing 36 games with a 2.0 goals against average and a .922 save percentage. So another solid prospect there in the Devils system. And the Dallas Stars have re-signed forward Tanner Kiro, who's already been with the organization. He gets a 2-year, two-way contract, $750K at the NHL level. The first year's $350, the second year's $375 if he ends up having to play at the American Hockey League level. So those are some really big paydays for AHL players, where many of which are making a far less than that. So I would suspect that they're probably banking on the fact that he'll play more at the NHL level than the AHL level, but certainly somebody who played a fair bit for them this past season, and obviously somebody they feel has a future with their organization there after putting in this time trying to get the opportunity to be an NHL player leading up to that. Before we jump into today's trade rumors, just a quick word here from our channel sponsor. Top Shelf Hockey is proud to be sponsored by Manscape. Of course, with Manscape, we have a special offer here for all Top Shelf Hockey viewers, where you can get 20% off and free shipping on all orders at manscaped.com. Now, of course, Manscaped just launched a brand new Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, which is a fantastic product. They've taken the level up here even again with the skin-safe replaceable blades. It's waterproof, it's wireless charging, has a travel lock on it, as well as a nice light so you don't miss what you're doing. So certainly a terrific product. Now, many people associate Manscaped with their trimmers, which is certainly kind of their top product, but they do have a lot of other great options as well, including what they call the Weed Whacker, which is another trimmer for your ears and nose. And they have a variety of deodorants and sprays as well, which also keep you fresh and are terrific as well. So certainly Manscaped has a lot to offer, and we certainly highly recommend all of their products. So check out manscaped.com and use promo code TSH for 20% off and free shipping. Now, as I mentioned as well, we have some interesting NHL trade rumors. I want to start here with Sam Reinhart. Now, both these players that we're going to talk about today are Buffalo Sabres that are expected to be traded. Of course, Reinhart and Eichel are likely going to dominate the rumor mill for a little while here until we get some more clarity on what's going to happen. But certainly there's a lot of talk before about Reinhart having a lot of interest himself, as well as interest from teams in Western Canada, between the Flames and the Canucks mostly generating most of that buzz, and that certainly could still be a possibility. But apparently some other teams like the Anaheim Ducks in Western U.S. and California are certainly generating some interest here as well. Now, we've mentioned before that the Ducks are a team that we're likely going to see make a few moves here. This is a team that's got a lot of fairly young players, but a lot of their prospects are not like super young anymore. We have guys like Sam Steele and Isaac Lunderstrom and Maxime Comtois and Max Jones. A lot of these guys have been in the NHL now for the most part on a fairly full-time basis for the past few years. Throwing a guy like Troy Terry. Actually, Troy Terry's another guy as well who could be included in a deal like this, because there was rumors that he was looking for a fresh start and some new scenery to kind of rejuvenate his NHL career. But a lot of these guys were solid-looking prospects and still could be solid NHL players and play bigger roles. Guys like Comtois, for example, of probably one of the few here that have actually kind of solidified more of a spot. But obviously, those are some currency for them that they could be looking to trade a little bit of that out in order to bring in a guy like Reinhart. I mean, the Ducks could certainly use another center iceman to play, especially top line minutes, because a guy like Ryan Getzlaf is certainly more, lower in their lineup, assuming he re-signs and stays there as their captain. So Reinhart could be an excellent player for them to fit in with some of their, already younger group of guys. Now, they have some guys there that also, besides these younger guys, that could be trade bait. There's been a lot of talk about Josh Manson maybe being on the move. That might interest Buffalo. There's also been talk a lot about Rickard Rakell and his possibility being traded. So there's certainly a lot of interesting pieces there. I suspect the Ducks are going to be a team that's very interesting this offseason. If it's not Sam Reinhart, it could be his teammate right now, Jack Eichel. It could be Patrick Laine. A lot of these younger players that are rumored to possibly find themselves on the move are teams that have been linked to the Anaheim Ducks. I suspect they're going to be looking to make at least one significant trade this offseason, and either of them could be the guy that happens here. But I understand in a case like Reinhart, he would certainly be a lot more affordable and a lot more easier to make a trade happen than a guy like Eichel. So we'll see what happens, but Reinhart's going to get a ton of attention as well. The pending RFA had a phenomenal season in Buffalo in a bad situation. He's a solid player with a fair bit of experience now, and he's a guy who's looking to win. He could help take a team up a major level here by making an acquisition. Now, of course, his teammate Jack Eichel is now being possibly linked by Boston Hockey Now and Jimmy Murphy to the Arizona Coyotes. Now, of course, not saying that a deal is anywhere close to being done by any means here, but Murphy is reporting that there have been discussions between the Sabres and the Coyotes have been one of the teams expressing a lot of interest. And even though they're not necessarily the first team that come to mind here about putting together a big offer to make an Eichel trade, if you think about it and look at their roster, there might be some interesting pieces there that might intrigue the Sabres. Now, as we've talked about before, we've talked about the Rangers, we've talked about the Kings, the Minnesota Wild, and a few others likely having the best odds to land a guy like Eichel. I mean, there's certainly other teams that could put together a package for him, but it doesn't always mean it's going to totally make sense. But a team like Arizona needs help down there. I mean, they're going to be looking to find a new head coach. They clearly have a lot of players that could be up for grabs here. I don't think there's a lot of guys there that GM Bill Armstrong is really attached to and really wants to continue building around. I mean, you even have Captain Oliver Ekman-Larsson was involved in a lot of trade talk last offseason. Now, of course, he's got a full no move, so he can control his destiny, and I don't imagine he would waive for Buffalo, so he wouldn't be involved, but he could still possibly revisit a potential trade this offseason. That would not be shocking news to find out that they want to once again have those conversations. It's been widely believed that they'd like to move on from Phil Kessel. Of course, Kessel's near the end of his contract, so there's not a lot of term or money left. It's a little bit of a cap hit, but not real bad considering there's retained money on Toronto side when he was originally traded from Toronto to Pittsburgh. So there's still, a decent amount here of other guys too that are much younger than these guys. But Kessel's a guy that could intrigue some teams. I don't know if he'd be involved. I can't imagine Buffalo would have high interest in him, even though he's a good player. I'm sure they would prefer somebody who's younger and more dynamic. So you're looking at some guys that are still younger, but not, super younger, but more established. You could get a guy like Nick Schmaltz, who's got a fair bit of term on his contract. He's only 25. You get Clayton Keller is a pretty dynamic winger at 22. I mean, Keller might be somebody who's very interested to them. That's a real possibility. I would imagine a guy like Jacob Chikrin on the blue line's probably somebody they don't want to trade, but you never know. I mean, I would think that Buffalo would probably ask about him, but I would think he'd be off limits. You get a guy like Aiden Hill between the pipes. That could be an interesting move. We know the Sabres need some help in goal. I'm sure the Coyotes would probably prefer not to move him. Obviously, they'd probably like to retain Kumper and Hill longer term would be my guess, but you really don't know for sure. I mean, a guy like Connor Garland's obviously a heck of a player on a cheap contract right now, going to be needing a new deal soon, but he's certainly a guy who's been very offensive and put together a very solid couple of seasons there in the desert as well. So there's certainly no shortage of interesting players. Like I said, I'm not sure that they're going to be able to really, truly compete with teams like the Kings or the Rangers, especially if those teams are willing to include their higher-end younger players. Like if the Rangers throw in a guy like Lafreniere or Kakko, well, that's a game changer. That's going to be really tough to beat. If the Kings want to throw in a guy like Turcotte or Byfield, well, that's going to be a game changer. But a lot of the reports we're hearing is that those teams, as much as they're interested in Eichel, they don't want to throw in those high-end level prospects like that. So they're trying to push a different kind of package. So maybe teams like the Wild, like we talked about, or the Coyotes, might actually stand more of a chance. So it's really difficult to say. Can you imagine, and Jack Eichel saying, no disrespect to the Coyotes, but they obviously have not been in a great situation themselves. They've obviously had a lot of issues over the years with attendance and ownership and the franchise really being stable. And to go from Buffalo to Arizona really would probably be something that Eichel would not be thrilled about, would be my guess. But you know what? He has a no-move clause in the contract, but it doesn't kick in for a while yet. It's not until after next year. So he wouldn't really have any choice in the matter, and it's really hard to say how things would go. But I would think any franchise, before pulling off that kind of trade, would want to have conversations with him and be comfortable that he's going to be happy and want to play there for a while and play with that contract, I would think, because, even though he doesn't have technically any say, if you have a player that gets disgruntled enough, then it's not going to be a good situation and it's not going to work anyway. But still, we'll see. I mean, obviously, it's not surprising to see the Coyotes be a little bit aggressive. I know there's lots of players there, like I mentioned, that I think they'd be willing to trade. And if they can get themselves a big name like Eichel to build around, that would be a huge step for them. But Eichel's already been that guy in Buffalo for a long time, and it's not working out. I don't really think he'd be thrilled with that kind of situation at all. I think he would much prefer to go to a team that's more established, further along, where he can actually have a chance to win and play a playoff game sometime soon. And I think depending on what the Coyotes do this offseason, they still might be a little ways from being able to do that on a consistent basis. At least that's my opinion right now. But we will see. Jimmy Murphy's reporting the Coyotes are interested. Doesn't mean they're going to be able to pull it off, but I can understand what they're trying to do. So let me know your thoughts on either of those players winding up with those teams down in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest NHL news from all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.